The scorching desert sun beat down mercilessly on the small military convoy as it moved through the rocky terrain of Afghanistan. Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez wiped the sweat from her forehead and adjusted her medic pack, scanning the horizon for any signs of danger. As a combat medic with 3 years of experience in war zones, she had seen enough to know that the silence was often more terrifying than the chaos of battle. Her unit was part of a joint operation, tasked with providing medical support to a special forces team conducting a high-priority mission in Taliban territory. The convoy consisted of 2 armored vehicles carrying medical supplies and personnel, along with their security detail. Maria had volunteered for this assignment, despite warnings from her commanding officer about the increased danger levels in the region. The radio crackled to life in her headset. "Alpha Base, this is Desert Eagle. We have wounded personnel requiring immediate medical evacuation. Coordinates following." The voice was calm, but urgent, with an underlying tension that made Maria's heart race. She quickly grabbed her notebook and jotted down the coordinates as they were transmitted. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Mitchell, the convoy commander, turned to Maria with a grim expression. "Rodriguez, we're changing course. Special Operations Command needs us at these coordinates ASAP. Intelligence reports suggest heavy enemy presence in the area, so we need to move fast and get out faster." The convoy altered its route, heading toward the coordinates provided. As they traveled deeper into hostile territory, Maria checked and rechecked her medical supplies. She had treated countless wounded soldiers, but something about this mission felt different. The urgency in the radio transmission and the classified nature of the operation suggested that whoever needed help was extremely important. After 30 minutes of rough terrain navigation, they reached the designated coordinates. What Maria saw made her blood run cold. A military helicopter had crashed into a rocky outcropping, its twisted metal frame smoking in the desert heat. Around the crash site, she could see figures moving, some helping others, some lying motionless on the ground. As their vehicle came to a stop, Maria grabbed her medical kit and jumped out, immediately assessing the situation. The crashed helicopter was a special operations aircraft, and the personnel around it were Navy SEALs. She could tell by their specialized gear and the way they moved with purpose despite their injuries. A SEAL approached her, his face covered in dust and blood from a head wound. "Doc, we've got multiple casualties here. Our medic was killed in the crash. We need you to look at our CO first. He's in bad shape." The SEAL's voice carried the weight of command despite his own obvious injuries. Maria followed him to where a man lay unconscious against a large rock. Even covered in dust and blood, she could see the insignia that marked him as a high-ranking officer. This was Commander Jake Sullivan, leader of one of the most elite SEAL teams in the military. His reputation preceded him, a decorated war hero who had led countless successful missions behind enemy lines. She immediately began her assessment. Commander Sullivan had a severe head injury, multiple lacerations, and what appeared to be internal bleeding. His pulse was weak and irregular, and his breathing was shallow. Maria knew that without immediate medical intervention, he wouldn't survive the journey back to base. Working quickly, she established an IV line and began administering fluids to stabilize his blood pressure. The other SEALs had formed a defensive perimeter around the crash site, but Maria could hear the distant sound of approaching vehicles. The enemy had detected the crash and was moving toward their position. "Doc, how long do you need?" asked the SEAL who had first approached her. Master Chief Petty Officer Tom Harris was now acting as the team's leader, and the concern in his eyes was evident as he looked at his commander. "At least 10 more minutes to stabilize him for transport," Maria replied, not looking up from her work. She was applying pressure bandages to stop the bleeding while monitoring his vital signs. "But he needs surgery within the hour, or we're going to lose him." The sound of gunfire erupted from the perimeter. The Taliban forces had found them, and a firefight had begun. Bullets whizzed overhead as Maria continued working on Commander Sullivan, her hands steady despite the chaos around her. She had trained for situations like this, but the reality was far more intense than any simulation. "We need to move now," shouted Harris over the gunfire. "More enemy vehicles are approaching from the east. We've got maybe 5 minutes before we're overrun." Maria looked at her patient. Commander Sullivan's condition had stabilized slightly, but moving him now would be extremely risky. However, staying meant certain death for all of them. She made the difficult decision that would define the rest of her life. "Help me get him to the vehicle," she ordered. "I'll continue treatment during transport, but we need to go now." 4 SEALs carefully lifted their commander, while Maria maintained the IV line and continued monitoring his condition. As they ran toward the convoy vehicles, enemy fire intensified. One of the SEALs carrying Sullivan stumbled and fell, and for a moment, it seemed like they might not make it. Maria dropped her medical bag and helped support Commander Sullivan's weight, her smaller frame straining under the load. Together, they managed to reach the armored vehicle and get him inside. As the convoy began to move, Maria worked frantically in the cramped space, performing emergency procedures that would normally require a fully equipped medical facility. The journey back to base was harrowing. The convoy came under attack twice, forcing them to take alternate routes through dangerous terrain. Throughout it all, Maria never left Commander Sullivan's side, adjusting his treatment as his condition fluctuated. She administered medications, monitored his breathing, and even performed a minor surgical procedure to relieve pressure from internal bleeding. As they finally approached the safety of their forward operating base, Maria allowed herself a moment of relief. Commander Sullivan's vital signs had improved significantly during the journey, and she was confident he would survive to receive proper surgical care. She had done everything she could under impossible circumstances. What she didn't know was that this moment would change her life forever. The unconscious commander she had saved would soon become the most important person in her world, and their story together was just beginning. 3 weeks had passed since the helicopter crash, and Commander Jake Sullivan was finally awake and alert in the military hospital at Bagram Air Base. The doctors had performed 2 surgeries to repair his internal injuries, and while he was expected to make a full recovery, the healing process would take months. What frustrated him most wasn't the physical pain, but the gaps in his memory from that day. Maria Rodriguez had been visiting the hospital daily, checking on the progress of all the wounded SEALs from the crash. As the medic who had provided critical care during their transport to safety, she felt responsible for their continued recovery. It was during one of these routine visits that she first encountered Commander Sullivan while he was conscious. She knocked on the door of his private room and entered to find him sitting up in bed, reviewing mission reports on a tablet. Despite his injuries, he maintained the commanding presence she had heard so much about. His dark hair was still showing signs of the head injury, but his sharp blue eyes were alert and focused. "Commander Sullivan, I'm Staff Sergeant Rodriguez. I was the medic who treated you during the evacuation," she said formally, maintaining military protocol despite the personal connection she felt to his case. Jake looked up from his tablet, studying her face carefully. Maria was petite, with long, dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun, and intelligent brown eyes that seemed to hold depths of experience beyond her years. There was something familiar about her, though he couldn't place exactly what. "Rodriguez," he said thoughtfully. "Master Chief Harris mentioned you several times. He said you saved my life out there." His voice was still somewhat hoarse from the injuries, but there was genuine warmth in his tone. Maria felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I was just doing my job, sir. Any medic would have done the same thing." Jake shook his head slowly. "Harris told me what really happened, how you worked on me under fire, how you dropped your own gear to help carry me when Martinez got hit. That wasn't just doing your job. That was going above and beyond." He paused, setting down his tablet. "I owe you my life." Over the following days, Jake found himself looking forward to Maria's visits. She would update him on the progress of his team members, share news from the base, and gradually their conversations began to extend beyond medical updates. Maria discovered that beneath the tough exterior of the legendary SEAL commander was a thoughtful, intelligent man who cared deeply about his team and took responsibility for everyone under his command. Jake learned that Maria had grown up in a military family in Texas, following in her father's footsteps by enlisting in the Army. She had always wanted to be a doctor, but financial circumstances had led her to become a medic instead. Her dedication to saving lives had brought her to Afghanistan for her second deployment, driven by a sense of duty to help those who needed it most. One evening, as Maria was preparing to leave after her daily visit, Jake asked her to stay a little longer. The hospital was quieter at this hour, and they had more privacy to talk freely. "I've been thinking about what happened out there," Jake said, his voice more serious than usual. "I don't remember much from the crash itself, but I remember fragments from the evacuation. I remember your voice, telling me to hang on, that everything would be okay." Maria sat down in the chair beside his bed. "You were drifting in and out of consciousness. I wasn't sure you could hear me." "I could hear you," Jake said quietly. "Your voice was the only thing anchoring me. When everything else was chaos and pain, your voice was calm and strong. It gave me something to hold on to." Their eyes met, and Maria felt something shift between them. This wasn't just gratitude from a patient to his caregiver. There was a deeper connection forming, something neither of them had expected. The next day, Jake received an unexpected visitor. Colonel James Mitchell, the base commander, arrived with several high-ranking officers and a stack of official documents. Maria happened to be in the room, updating Jake's medical chart when they arrived. "Commander Sullivan, I hope you're feeling well enough for some good news," Colonel Mitchell said with a smile. "I'm here to inform you that you're being recommended for the Silver Star for your actions during the mission that led to the helicopter crash. Your team successfully completed the objective despite the circumstances." Jake accepted the honor, with typical humility, but Maria could see the pride in his eyes. What happened next, however, surprised everyone in the room. "Colonel, if I may," Jake said, his voice formal but determined, "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez deserves recognition for her actions that day. Without her medical intervention under fire, neither I nor several of my team members would have survived. I'd like to recommend her for the Bronze Star with Valor device." "Colonel?" Mitchell looked surprised, then turned to Maria. "Sergeant Rodriguez, is this accurate? Did you provide medical care under enemy fire?" Maria stood at attention. "Yes, sir. I provided emergency medical treatment during the evacuation, while the area was under hostile fire." "The entire SEAL team can attest to her actions," Jake added. "Master Chief Harris has already prepared a detailed report of the incident, Sergeant." Rodriguez went far beyond the call of duty that day. 2 weeks later, Maria found herself standing in formation on the base parade ground, receiving the Bronze Star Medal for her heroic actions. Jake, despite still recovering from his injuries, had insisted on presenting the award himself. As he pinned the medal to her uniform, he leaned close and whispered, "You deserve this and so much more." The recognition changed things between them. Word of Maria's heroic actions spread throughout the base, earning her respect and admiration from soldiers and officers alike. But more importantly, the ceremony had solidified something between her and Jake that had been building since their first conscious meeting. After the ceremony, Jake approached her privately. Despite the formal setting and their difference in rank, he couldn't hide his feelings any longer. "Maria," he said, using her first name for the first time, "I know this is complicated with military regulations and everything, but I need you to know what I feel for you goes far beyond gratitude. You've become the most important person in my world." Maria looked around to make sure they weren't being observed, then met his eyes directly. "Jake, I feel the same way. But you're right. This is complicated. The regulations? The difference. In our ranks, the fact that you're going back to the States for extended rehabilitation, while I still have 6 months left on my deployment." Jake nodded, understanding the challenges they faced. "I know all of that, but I also know that what we have is worth fighting for. When I get back to the States, I'm going to put in for a transfer to a stateside position. No more combat deployments. I've done my time, and I want to build a life, a real life, with someone who matters." Maria felt her heart skip a beat. The thought of a future with Jake seemed almost too good to be true. But she could see in his eyes that he was serious about changing his entire career trajectory for the possibility of being with her. "What are you saying?" she asked quietly. Jake took her hands in his, despite the risk of being seen. "I'm saying I love you, Maria Rodriguez, and if you'll have me, I want to spend the rest of my life showing you just how grateful I am. Not just for saving my life, but for making me want to truly live it. 6 months stretched ahead of them like an eternity. Jake Sullivan had been medically evacuated to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Maryland, where he would undergo extensive rehabilitation for his injuries. Maria remained at Bagram Air Base, continuing her duties as a combat medic while counting down the days until her deployment ended. Their only connection was through letters, emails, and occasional video calls when the internet connection at the base allowed it. Jake had insisted on writing physical letters, saying that holding something she had touched made the distance feel less overwhelming. Maria treasured each handwritten letter, keeping them in a special box under her bunk. Jake's first letter arrived, 2 weeks after his departure, written on hospital stationery in his careful, precise handwriting. "My dearest Maria," it began, "I know we've only been apart for 2 weeks, but it feels like months already. The doctors here are impressed with my progress, though they keep reminding me to be patient. Patience has never been my strong suit, especially now when all I want is to be back with you. I think about our last conversation every day, about the future we talked about building together. That hope is what's driving my recovery faster than any medicine they could give me." Maria wrote back immediately, describing her daily routine at the base and sharing stories of the patients she treated. She told him about the young soldier who reminded her of her little brother, and the Afghan interpreter who had been wounded while helping American forces and was slowly recovering under her care. "Your letters are like rays of sunshine in this desert," she wrote. "Reading about your progress gives me hope, not just for us, but for all the wounded soldiers I see here every day. You're proof that recovery is possible, that injuries don't have to define the rest of someone's life. The other medics tease me about how I smile every time mail call happens, but I don't care. Your letters make everything here bearable." As weeks turned into months, their correspondence deepened. They shared childhood memories, dreams for the future, and fears about what challenges they might face as a couple. Jake wrote about his rehabilitation process, the painful physical therapy sessions, and his growing certainty that he wanted to transition away from active combat roles. "I've been thinking about what comes next," he wrote in his 4th letter. "I've spoken with my commanding officer about transitioning to a training position stateside. There's an opportunity to head up a new combat medic training program at Fort Bragg. It would mean working closely with medics like you, training them for deployment situations. The irony isn't lost on me. The man who was saved by a medic now wants to train medics to save others." Maria was thrilled by the news. Fort Bragg was in North Carolina, and she had already been considering requesting a transfer there after her deployment ended. The idea that Jake might be there, doing work that aligned perfectly with her own skills and interests, seemed too perfect to be coincidental. Her response was filled with excitement and carefully controlled hope. "The training position sounds perfect for you. You have so much experience to share, and knowing you're helping to prepare medics for what they'll face in combat zones gives meaning to everything you've been through. I've been looking into advanced medical training programs myself. There's a physician assistant program that would allow me to continue serving while advancing my medical skills. If I could get accepted, it would mean 2 more years of military commitment, but I'd emerge as a PA instead of just a medic." Their relationship continued to grow through their written correspondence. Jake shared details about his family, his parents who ran a small ranch in Montana, his younger sister who was a teacher in Denver. Maria told him about her large extended family in Texas, her father who was a retired Army sergeant, and her mother who worried constantly about her daughter's safety but was proud of her service. One letter from Jake arrived with a small package. Inside, Maria found a simple silver chain with a small compass pendant. The accompanying letter explained its significance. "This compass belonged to my grandfather who carried it through World War II. He gave it to me when I joined the Navy, and it's been with me on every mission since then. I want you to have it now, not just as a symbol of my feelings for you, but as a promise. No matter where we are in the world, no matter what challenges we face, this compass will always point us back to each other." Maria wore the compass every day, touching it whenever she felt overwhelmed by the distance between them or the uncertainty of their future. It became her talisman, a physical reminder that someone was waiting for her, that their separation was temporary. The video calls were precious but frustrating. The base's internet connection was unreliable, leading to frozen screens and dropped calls just when they were deep in conversation. During one particularly clear connection, they were able to talk for nearly 2 hours about their plans for when Maria returned to the States. "I've been approved for the training position," Jake told her, his face pixelated but his smile clearly visible on the small screen. "I'll start in 2 months, which means I'll be settled in North Carolina by the time you get back. Have you heard anything about the PA program?" Maria nodded enthusiastically. "I've been accepted. I can't believe it. They want me to start in the fall semester. The program is at Duke University, which is less than 3 hours from Fort Bragg. Jake, it's all falling into place exactly as we hoped." Their excitement was interrupted by incoming mortar fire at the base. Maria had to quickly shut down the computer and report to her duty station, leaving Jake staring at a blank screen and worrying about her safety. These moments reminded both of them of the dangers Maria still faced daily, and the relief that would come when she was finally home. As Maria's deployment neared its end, their letters became more frequent and more intimate. They began planning their reunion, discussing where they would meet and what their first few weeks together would look like. The anticipation was almost overwhelming. Jake's final letter before her scheduled return was the longest yet, covering several pages in his neat handwriting. He wrote about his complete recovery, his excitement about starting the new training program, and his certainty that their relationship was meant to be. "Maria, when I think about the chain of events that brought us together, the mission, the crash, the random assignment that put you with our convoy, I can't help but believe in fate. You saved my life in that desert, but more than that, you gave me a reason to rebuild it into something better. I love you not just for what you did for me as a medic, but for who you are as a person. Your strength, your compassion, your unwavering commitment to helping others. These are the qualities that made me fall in love with you, and they're the same qualities that will make our life together extraordinary." The letter concluded with plans for their reunion and a promise that would change everything. "I've made a decision about us, about our future. There's something I want to ask you when I see you, something I want to give you. Until then, know that you are loved completely and unconditionally by a man who owes you everything and wants to spend his life making sure you never regret saving him." Maria read that final letter dozens of times, wondering what Jake had planned and feeling her heart race with anticipation. In just 2 weeks, she would be on a plane home, and their long-distance relationship would finally end. Whatever Jake wanted to ask her, whatever he wanted to give her, she already knew her answer would be yes. The plane touched down at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport on a crisp October morning, and Maria Rodriguez felt her heart hammering against her ribs as she gathered her belongings. After 6 months of separation, she was finally going to see Jake again. The other soldiers on the plane were excited about their own homecomings, but Maria's nervous energy seemed to radiate beyond her seat. Jake had wanted to meet her at the airport, but military protocol required that she report to Fort Hood first for debriefing and processing. They had arranged to meet the following weekend at a small bed and breakfast in Austin, halfway between Fort Hood and Fort Bragg, where Jake was now stationed as the head of the new Combat Medic Advanced Training Program. The processing at Fort Hood seemed to take forever. Maria went through medical evaluations, debriefings about her deployment, and mountains of paperwork. Every minute felt like an hour as she thought about seeing Jake again. Would things be the same between them? Had their letter-writing relationship built up expectations that reality couldn't meet? Finally, after 3 days of military bureaucracy, Maria was cleared to take leave before reporting to her next assignment. She had 5 days before she needed to be at Duke University to begin the physician assistant program that would define the next chapter of her career. The drive to Austin gave her time to think and, unfortunately, to worry. She had changed during her deployment. The experiences of treating wounded soldiers, the constant threat of danger, and the isolation had all left their mark on her. What if Jake noticed these changes? What if the man she had fallen in love with through letters was different from the man who had recovered from his injuries? The bed and breakfast was a charming Victorian house surrounded by oak trees, their leaves just beginning to turn colors with the changing season. Maria checked in and was told that Mr. Sullivan had already arrived and was waiting for her in the garden behind the house. She took a moment to check her appearance in the lobby mirror, smoothing her civilian clothes, a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes, her dark hair loose around her shoulders for the first time in months. She had traded her combat boots for sandals, her uniform for clothes that made her feel feminine again. The garden was beautifully landscaped, with winding stone paths and wooden benches scattered among the flower beds. She found Jake sitting on a bench near a small fountain, wearing khaki pants and a button-down shirt that showed off his full recovery. He looked healthy and strong, the injuries from the helicopter crash now just faint scars that somehow made him even more handsome. When he saw her walking down the path, Jake stood and just stared for a moment, as if he couldn't believe she was real. 6 months of seeing her only in photographs and pixelated video calls hadn't prepared him for the impact of seeing her in person again. "Maria," he said softly, then louder. "Maria." He walked quickly toward her, and suddenly they were in each other's arms, holding tight as if they were afraid the other might disappear. "I can't believe you're really here," Jake murmured into her hair. "I've imagined this moment so many times, but it's even better than I hoped." Maria pulled back to look at his face, tracing the faint scar on his temple with her finger. "You look incredible. Completely recovered. I'm so proud of how hard you worked in rehabilitation." They spent the afternoon walking through Austin, talking constantly as they caught up on the details that couldn't be conveyed in letters. Jake told her about his new position, how rewarding it was to train medics who would face the same challenges she had faced. Maria shared stories from the final months of her deployment and her excitement about starting the PA program. Over dinner at a quiet restaurant, their conversation turned more serious. Jake reached across the table and took her hands, his expression becoming intent. "Maria, I need to tell you something. These past 6 months apart have been the longest of my life, but they've also been the most important. They gave me time to think about what I really want from life, what matters most to me." Maria felt her pulse quicken. This felt like the conversation Jake had hinted at in his final letter. "I spent 15 years in the military, most of it in combat zones, thinking that the mission was everything. I was proud of my service, but I never thought beyond the next deployment, the next operation. The crash changed that. You changed that." Jake paused, his thumb stroking across her knuckles. "When I was lying unconscious in that desert, when I was fighting for my life in the hospital, when I was struggling through months of rehabilitation, there was only one thing that kept me going. The thought of building a life with you." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "Jake, let me finish," he said gently. "I know we haven't known each other long in traditional terms. I know that military relationships can be complicated and that we're both at turning points in our careers. But I also know that what I feel for you isn't going to change, whether we've known each other 6 months or 6 years." Jake released her hands and reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Maria's breath caught in her throat. "Maria Rodriguez, you saved my life in that desert, but more than that, you gave me a reason to truly live. You're the strongest, most compassionate, most incredible woman I've ever known. I want to spend the rest of my life loving you, supporting your dreams and building something beautiful together." He opened the box to reveal a stunning ring, not overly large or flashy, but elegant and timeless. The center stone was surrounded by smaller diamonds that caught the restaurant's soft lighting. "Will you marry me?" Jake asked, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. Maria looked at the ring, then at Jake's face, then back at the ring. 6 months ago, she had been a combat medic focused entirely on her job and her service. Now she was being offered something she had never dared to dream about. A future, with a man who understood her world, who had walked the same difficult paths she had walked. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Jake, absolutely yes." Jake slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood to kiss her as the other diners in the restaurant began to applaud. The ring fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her hand. Later, as they walked back to the bed and breakfast under the stars, Maria kept looking at the ring sparkling on her finger. Everything felt surreal, like a dream she might wake up from at any moment. "I can't believe this is real," she said, leaning into Jake's side as they walked. "It's real," Jake assured her, kissing the top of her head. "We're real. This is just the beginning for us." They spent the next day planning their future together. Jake had already been thinking through the logistics. Maria would complete her PA program at Duke while he continued his work at Fort Bragg. They could see each other on weekends, and after her graduation, there would be opportunities for her to work at military medical facilities near Fort Bragg. "I've also been thinking about after your military commitment ends," Jake said, as they sat on the bed in breakfast's front porch swing. "I've got enough years in to retire with full benefits in 3 more years. We could go anywhere, do anything. Maybe buy some land in Montana near my family's ranch, start our own medical practice." Maria loved hearing him think out loud about their future. It felt solid and real. Not like a fantasy, but like an actual plan they could work toward together. "I want to finish my commitment to the military," she said thoughtfully. "I owe them that much for the training they've given me. But after that, I like the idea of having options, of choosing where we want to be based on what we want from life rather than where we're ordered to go." Jake smiled and pulled her closer. "We have time to figure it all out. Right now, I just want to enjoy being engaged to the woman I love." As the sun set on their perfect day, Maria reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. A year ago, she had been focused solely on her military career, never imagining that she would meet someone who would make her want to plan a completely different kind of future. Now, wearing Jake's ring and thinking about their upcoming wedding, she realized that sometimes the most important moments in life come from the most unexpected circumstances. She had gone into that desert to save lives as a medic, never knowing that she would also find the love of her life. The next 18 months flew by in a whirlwind of medical school, weekend visits, and wedding planning. Maria threw herself into the physician assistant program at Duke University with the same dedication she had shown as a combat medic, while Jake established himself as one of the most effective training instructors at Fort Bragg. Maria's academic performance was outstanding. Her real-world experience treating trauma patients gave her an advantage over her civilian classmates, and her professors frequently used her case studies as teaching examples. She specialized in emergency medicine and trauma care, knowing that these skills would serve her well whether she remained in the military or transitioned to civilian practice. The 3-hour drive between Durham and Fort Bragg became as familiar as her own neighborhood. Every Friday afternoon, one of them would make the journey to spend the weekend together. Sometimes Jake would drive to Durham and they would explore the college town, attend Duke basketball games, or simply stay in Maria's small apartment studying together. Other weekends, Maria would drive to Fort Bragg, where Jake had rented a small house off base that was slowly becoming their shared home. Their relationship deepened as they navigated the challenges of planning a life together while managing demanding careers. Jake proved to be an incredibly supportive partner, understanding the pressures of Maria's medical training because of his own military background. When she had to pull all-night study sessions before major exams, he would drive to Durham with coffee and homemade meals, sitting quietly in her apartment while she studied. Planning their wedding became a joint project that revealed how well they worked as a team. They decided on a ceremony that would honor both their military service and their family's traditions. The wedding would take place at a historic chapel in San Antonio, Texas, near Maria's family home, with the reception at a nearby ranch that reminded them both of Jake's family's property in Montana. Maria's family embraced Jake immediately. Her father, retired Army Sergeant Miguel Rodriguez, appreciated Jake's military record and his obvious devotion to Maria. During Jake's first visit to the Rodriguez family home, Miguel pulled him aside for what Maria feared would be an intimidating father-daughter talk. "I've seen a lot of soldiers in my time," Miguel told Jake as they sat on the back porch. "I can tell the difference between the ones who are just playing at being tough and the ones who have real character. You're the real deal, son. More importantly, I've never seen my daughter happier than she's been since she started talking about you." Jake's family was equally welcoming to Maria. His parents, Robert and Helen Sullivan, ran a cattle ranch in the mountains of Montana. When Maria visited for the first time, she fell in love with the vast open spaces and the peaceful rhythm of ranch life. Helen taught her to ride horses while Robert showed her around the property and shared stories of Jake's childhood. He was always the responsible one, Helen told Maria as they prepared dinner together in the ranch house kitchen. Even as a little boy, he felt responsible for taking care of everyone else. I worried when he joined the military that he would never let anyone take care of him. But I can see that you two take care of each other. As Maria's graduation from the PA program approached, they faced decisions about their immediate future. The military was offering her several options for her next assignment, including positions at military hospitals in North Carolina, Texas, and Germany. Jake's commitment to the training program meant he needed to remain at Fort Bragg for at least 2 more years. "What do you really want to do?" Jake asked during one of their planning sessions. They were sitting in his kitchen, surrounded by deployment options and military paperwork. Maria had been thinking about this question for weeks. "Honestly, I want to stay near Fort Bragg. I want to work at the military hospital there, supporting the same kind of soldiers you're training. It feels like we would be working toward the same mission, even if we're in different roles." Jake smiled, relieved. He had hoped she would choose to stay nearby, but he hadn't wanted to influence her decision. "The hospital at Fort Bragg has an excellent trauma center. You'd be working with some of the best military medical professionals in the country. Plus," Maria added with a grin, "it means we can finally live together full-time. I'm tired of weekend relationships and long-distance phone calls." 3 weeks before their wedding, Maria graduated from the PA program with honors. Jake was in the audience, along with both sets of parents, beaming with pride as she walked across the stage to receive her diploma. After the ceremony, he surprised her with a small celebration at her favorite restaurant in Durham, where he had arranged for several of her classmates and professors to join them. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered in her ear as they danced, to the restaurant's background music. "Dr. Maria Rodriguez Sullivan has a nice ring to it," Maria laughed. "I'm not a doctor yet, just a PA. And we're not married yet either, so it's still just Rodriguez for now." "Soon enough," Jake said, spinning her around. 2 more weeks, and you'll officially be stuck with me." The final weeks before the wedding were chaotic but exciting. Maria's extended family began arriving in San Antonio, filling her parents' house and several nearby hotels. Jake's family made the long journey from Montana, and his SEAL team friends flew in from various bases around the country. Master Chief Diu Harris, who had become like a brother to Jake since the helicopter crash, was serving as his best man. The bachelor and bachelorette parties were low-key affairs, more focused on celebration than wild partying. Maria's girlfriends from the PA program joined her cousins for a day at a San Antonio spa, followed by dinner at the Riverwalk. Jake's groomsmen, mostly fellow SEALs and military instructors, spent their evening at a local steakhouse sharing war stories and embarrassing tales from Jake's younger days. 2 days before the wedding, Maria and Jake had their final pre-marriage counseling session with the military chaplain who would be performing their ceremony. Captain Rodriguez, no relation to Maria, had been working with them for months, helping them think through the unique challenges that military couples face. "You've both seen the statistics," Captain Rodriguez said during their session. "Military marriages face higher divorce rates than civilian marriages, largely due to the stresses of deployment, relocation, and the demands of military life. But you two have some significant advantages." He listed them off on his fingers. "First, you both understand military life and its demands. Second, you've already proven you can maintain your relationship through separation and stress. Third, you share the same core values of service and sacrifice. Most importantly, you've both demonstrated that you're willing to adapt your individual career goals to support your relationship." That evening, Maria and Jake had dinner alone, away from their families and wedding preparations. They drove to a quiet restaurant outside the city where they could talk privately about their hopes and concerns for their marriage. "Are you nervous?" Maria asked as they shared dessert. Jake considered the question seriously. "Not nervous about marrying you. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. But I am a little nervous about being a good husband." I've spent so many years focused on being a good soldier that I'm not sure I know how to be a good partner in a marriage. Maria reached across the table and took his hand. Jake, you've already proven you know how to be a good partner. The way you supported me through PA school, the way you rearranged your entire career to be near me, the way you include me in every decision about our future. That's what being a good husband looks like. What about you? Jake asked. Any second thoughts? Maria shook her head firmly. No second thoughts. But I do have some fears. I worry about what happens when one of us gets deployed again. We've talked about it, but we haven't faced it yet. I worry about balancing my career ambitions with being a military wife. And I worry about living up to the example your parents set. They've been married for 35 years and still act like newlyweds. Jake squeezed her hand. We'll figure out the deployment issue when it comes up. As for balancing your career and being a military wife, you're not giving up your identity to marry me. You're Maria Rodriguez, PA, who happens to be married to a SEAL. And as for my parents, they had to figure out their marriage just like we do. They weren't born knowing how to make it work. The night before the wedding, Maria lay awake in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by the decorations and mementos from her teenage years. Tomorrow she would wake up as Maria Rodriguez for the last time. By evening, she would be Mrs. Maria Sullivan, starting a completely new chapter of her life. She thought about the journey that had brought her to this point, from the young woman who had enlisted in the army to pay for college, to the combat medic who had saved a SEAL commander's life in the Afghan desert, to the PA student who had fallen in love through letters and long-distance phone calls. Each step had seemed random at the time, but looking back, it all felt like it had been leading to this moment. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Jake. Can't sleep either? Just wanted to say I love you and I can't wait to marry you tomorrow. Maria smiled and typed back, I love you too. Sweet dreams, future husband. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Maria felt a deep sense of peace. Tomorrow would bring the formal beginning of their marriage, but in her heart, she and Jake had been building a life together since the day he first opened his eyes in that hospital room and thanked her for saving his life. Tomorrow would simply make official what had been true for a long time. They were meant to be together. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and beautiful in San Antonio, with a gentle breeze that stirred the oak trees around the historic chapel. Maria woke up in her childhood bedroom feeling a mixture of excitement and calm that surprised her. After all the months of planning and anticipation, the day was finally here. Her mother, Carmen, brought her coffee in bed, a tradition they had maintained since Maria was a little girl on special occasions. How are you feeling, mija? Carmen asked, settling on the edge of the bed. Perfect, Maria said and meant it. I feel like everything in my life has been leading to this day. The morning flew by in a blur of hair appointments, makeup, and the careful ritual of getting dressed. Maria's wedding dress was elegant, but not overly elaborate. A fitted bodice with delicate lace sleeves and a flowing skirt that would allow her to move freely. She had chosen it because it made her feel beautiful but still like herself. Her younger sister Rosa helped with the final touches, adjusting the veil and making sure every detail was perfect. You look like a princess, Rosa said, tears already forming in her eyes. Don't start crying yet, Maria laughed. We haven't even left for the church. At the chapel, Jake was going through his own pre-wedding preparations with considerably less fuss but equal attention to detail. Master Chief Harris was proving to be an efficient best man, making sure Jake's uniform was perfect and handling last-minute coordination with the wedding planner. Jake had chosen to wear his navy dress blue uniform for the ceremony, complete with all his medals and ribbons. The uniform represented the career that had shaped him and the experiences that had brought him and Maria together. Looking at himself in the mirror, he felt the weight of the moment. Not just the wedding itself, but everything it represented, about the new life he was building. You ready for this, Commander? Harris asked, adjusting Jake's medals one final time. I've never been more ready for anything in my life, Jake replied, and Harris could hear the absolute certainty in his voice. The chapel was filled with an interesting mix of guests, military personnel in uniform, Maria's large extended family, Jake's ranch family from Montana, and friends from their respective careers. The combination of military precision and warm family atmosphere created exactly the kind of celebration Maria and Jake had envisioned. As the ceremony began, Jake took his position at the altar with Harris beside him. The chapel's stained glass, windows cast colored light across the pews, and the afternoon sun streaming through created an almost ethereal atmosphere. The music began, and Jake's heart started racing as he waited for his first glimpse of Maria as his bride. The wedding party proceeded down the aisle, Maria's cousins as bridesmaids in soft blue dresses that complemented the military uniforms in the congregation. Then the music changed to the traditional wedding march, and everyone rose as Maria appeared at the back of the chapel with her father. Jake's breath caught in his throat. She was absolutely radiant, moving with the confident grace he had always admired, but transformed by the joy and anticipation on her face. As Maria walked down the aisle, she kept her eyes focused on Jake waiting for her at the altar. He looked incredibly handsome in his dress uniform, but more than that, he looked like home. Every step toward him felt like a step toward the future they had planned and dreamed about together. Halfway down the aisle, she caught sight of some unexpected guests in the congregation, several of the SEALs from Jake's original team, including some who had been wounded in the helicopter crash. They had flown in as a surprise, arranged secretly by Harris and Jake's commanding officer. Maria's eyes filled with tears as she realized that the men whose lives she had helped save were here to witness her wedding. When she reached the altar, her father placed her hand in Jake's with a gentle pat on Jake's shoulder and a whispered, "Take care of her, son." Jake nodded solemnly, understanding the trust being placed in him. The ceremony itself was both traditional and deeply personal. Captain Rodriguez spoke about the unique bond between two people who had served their country and found love through service. He read from letters Maria and Jake had written to each other, sharing their vision of marriage as a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and unwavering support. When it came time for vows, Maria and Jake had chosen to write their own, speaking directly to each other about the journey that had brought them together and their promises for the future. Jake spoke first, his voice strong and clear despite the emotion visible in his eyes. "Maria, when I was lying in that desert, fighting for my life, I couldn't have imagined that my darkest moment would lead to my greatest blessing. You didn't just save my life that day. You gave me a reason to truly live it. You showed me that strength and compassion aren't opposites, but partners. You've made me a better man, a better soldier, and now I promise to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of your love." He paused, looking directly into her eyes. "I promise to support your dreams, even when they take you far from me. I promise to be your partner in building a life that honors both our service to country and our commitment to each other. I promise to love you not just in the easy moments, but especially when life gets difficult, when deployments separate us, when the demands of our careers test our relationship. You saved my life once, and now I'm giving it to you completely." Maria's turn came, and despite her tears, her voice was steady and confident. "Jake, I became a medic because I wanted to save lives, but I never expected that saving your life would transform my own so completely. You've shown me what it means to be truly known and loved by another person. You've supported my dreams, encouraged my ambitions, and made me believe that I can have both a meaningful career and a beautiful marriage." She took a breath, smiling through her tears. "I promise to be your partner in every adventure life brings us. I promise to support your goals, honor your service, and build a home with you wherever the military sends us. I promise to love you not just as the hero I saved in the desert, but as the man who makes me laugh, who challenges me to be better, who holds my hand through every difficult moment. I choose you, Jake Sullivan, as my husband, my partner, and my best friend for the rest of our lives." The exchange of rings was accompanied by another surprise. The rings were presented on a small pillow made from fabric taken from the medical kit Maria had used to save Jake's life. Harris had coordinated with Maria's mother to create this meaningful detail, symbolizing how their love had grown from that first moment of connection. When Captain Rodriguez pronounced them husband and wife, Jake and Maria's kiss was met with thunderous applause and cheers from the congregation. As they turned to face their family and friends as a married couple, the military guests created a saber arch for them to walk under, a tradition that symbolized their entry into married life under the protection and blessing of their military family. The reception at the nearby ranch was a perfect blend of elegant celebration and relaxed family gathering. The venue, with its rustic charm and beautiful hill country views, provided the ideal backdrop for their first party as husband and wife. During their first dance to At Last by Etta James, Maria and Jake were lost in their own world, barely aware of the guests watching them. "We did it," Maria whispered as they swayed together. "This is just the beginning," Jake replied, spinning her gently. "Mrs. Sullivan." "I like the sound of that," Maria laughed. "Though I'm keeping Rodriguez. Professionally, Dr. Maria Rodriguez Sullivan, P.A. "Perfect," Jake said, pulling her closer. "Whatever you want to call yourself, you're mine now." The evening was filled with heartfelt toasts, dancing, and celebration. Master Chief Harris's best man speech brought both laughter and tears as he described Jake's transformation from a focused warrior to a man obviously head over heels in love. Maria's father spoke about watching his daughter grow into a woman of strength and compassion, and how proud he was to welcome Jake into their family. As the evening wound down, Maria and Jake made their rounds, thanking guests and saying goodbye. The SEALs from Jake's original team presented them with a special wedding gift, a framed photo of the helicopter crash site, along with a plaque reading, "Where love was born from service and sacrifice." Late that night, as they finally had a few quiet moments alone on the ranch's back porch, Maria and Jake reflected on their wedding day and looked ahead to their future. "Any regrets?" Jake asked, pulling Maria close as they looked up at the stars. "Only that we can't do it again tomorrow," Maria replied. "It was perfect, Jake. Everything about today was exactly what I dreamed of." "Tomorrow we start our real adventure," Jake said. "Our honeymoon in Montana, then setting up house together at Fort Bragg, starting your new job at the hospital. Are you ready for all of it?" Maria looked at her wedding ring sparkling in the starlight, then at her husband's face filled with love and anticipation. "I'm ready for everything, as long as we're doing it together. You saved my heart, Jake Sullivan, just like I saved your life. Now we get to spend the rest of our lives taking care of each other." As they kissed under the Texas stars, both of them knew that their love story was far from over. The wedding was not an ending, but a beginning, the start of a marriage, built on a foundation of service, sacrifice, and the kind of love that grows stronger through every challenge life might bring their way.